My heart pounded against my ribs as I shoved my boarding pass at the gate agent at JFK and practically fell into seat 14A, the leather cool against my clammy neck. By the time the captain announced our destination as San Francisco instead of Chicago, the plane was already taxiing, and the realization hit me like a freight train. I had grabbed the wrong ticket in my frantic rush through security, and now I was hurtling toward the wrong coast with no way off. The woman next to me in 14B offered a sympathetic smile, but it was the man in 13A who caught my eye. Tall, dark-haired, with an easy confidence that made the cabin feel smaller. "First time messing up a flight?" he asked, his voice warm like he already knew the answer. I laughed nervously, rubbing my temples. "Yeah, and probably the last. I'm Emmanuel. Work trip gone wrong before it even started." He extended a hand. "Xavier. Photographer. Heading home after a shoot in New York. Looks like fate decided you needed a detour." The engines roared as we lifted off, and for the first hour I stared out the window, replaying the morning. My fiancée Rebecca's worried call about the Chicago conference, my boss's deadline pressure, the way my parents back in suburban Illinois still asked when we'd set a date. Everything felt scripted, safe, until the stranger leaned over with a bottle of water from the attendant. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. Want to talk about it? Or should I mind my own business?" Something in his tone cracked the wall I'd built around myself since college, when fleeting thoughts about men had been shoved deep down under layers of expectation. I found myself telling him about the endless meetings, the engagement ring that felt heavier every day, the quiet fear that I was living someone else's dream. Xavier listened without judgment, sharing how he'd come out to his family in San Francisco years ago and never looked back, building a life capturing moments others missed. By the time the seatbelt sign dinged for turbulence, our conversation had shifted from small talk to something deeper, his laugh pulling me out of my head in ways Rebecca's never had. The hours blurred as we swapped stories. Mine about growing up in a tight-knit Midwest family where Sunday dinners meant church and tradition. His about chasing sunsets across California for the perfect shot. I didn't notice how the plane dipped until Xavier pointed out the Golden Gate Bridge glinting below. "Welcome to your accidental adventure, Emmanuel," he said, eyes sparkling. When we landed, my phone buzzed with panic texts from Rebecca and my boss, but for the first time in years I felt a strange lightness. Xavier handed me his card as we deplaned. "If you're stuck in the city overnight, call me. San Francisco has a way of changing people." I pocketed it, heart racing for reasons I couldn't name yet, already knowing this wrong turn had opened a door I'd spent a lifetime bolting shut. The terminal lights blurred as I stood there, suitcase in hand, wondering how one boarding mistake could feel like the first right thing in my life. The hotel in downtown San Francisco was nothing like the sterile Chicago conference center I'd pictured, but my mind wasn't on the marble lobby or the view of the bay. My fingers kept brushing Xavier's card in my pocket while I checked in, Rebecca's latest voice message looping in my head. Call me when you land. The team's waiting on your slides." I texted her a quick update about the mix-up, omitting the part where I'd spent 5 hours talking to a stranger who made me question everything. By evening, curiosity won out. "Hey, it's Emmanuel from the plane. Still up for that city tour?" Xavier replied instantly, "Meet me at the ferry building in 30. Bring an open mind." The fog had rolled in, turning the streets into a soft haze as I walked, my dress shoes clicking against the pavement. He was waiting by the market stalls, camera slung over his shoulder, casual in jeans and a leather jacket that made him look like he belonged to the city in a way I never had anywhere. "Glad you called," he said, handing me a warm sourdough roll from a vendor. "First rule of San Francisco: never turn down carbs after a flight disaster." We wandered the Embarcadero, the bay breeze carrying salt and possibility. Xavier pointed out murals and hidden alleys, sharing how he'd moved here after college to escape the small-town whispers back east. "My dad still doesn't get it," he admitted over coffee at a pier cafe. "But I stopped waiting for approval years ago. Life's too short to hide who you are." His words landed heavy. I told him about the pressure back home, my father's expectations for the family business, my mother's quiet hopes for grandkids, Rebecca's patient smile that never quite reached my doubts. I've never said any of this out loud, I confessed, staring at the water. Xavier didn't push, just nodded like he understood the weight of unspoken truths. We ended up at a quiet viewpoint overlooking the bridge, city lights twinkling like stars that had fallen to earth. You know, Emmanuel, sometimes the wrong flight is exactly what you need to find the right direction. His hand brushed mine accidentally as he pointed at a passing ferry, and the spark lingered longer than it should have. Back at the hotel, I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every laugh, every shared silence. Rebecca called again, voice tight with worry about rescheduling my meetings, but I heard myself promising to fix it tomorrow while my mind drifted to Xavier's easy confidence. The next morning I extended my hotel stay for work, ignoring the lie twisting in my gut. Xavier texted a photo of the sunrise he'd captured. Join me for a hike in Marin? No pressure, just views. I went, the trail winding through redwoods that made New York seem like a distant dream. We talked about everything and nothing. Favorite books, childhood fears, the way silence could be louder than words. By the time we reached the overlook, sweat cooling on my skin, I felt seen in a way no one had ever managed. You're different when you're not rushing to the next obligation, Xavier said quietly. I wanted to argue, but the truth settled instead. This detour wasn't just about a city. It was about me. That evening, over Thai food in the Mission District, he asked about my engagement, and I admitted the ring felt like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep anymore. He listened, eyes steady. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not the version everyone else expects. Walking back, the fog wrapped around us like a secret, and for the first time I didn't feel alone in my confusion. My boss emailed about the missed conference, but the panic I expected never came. Instead, I booked another night, already planning to see Xavier again. The wrong flight had landed me exactly where I needed to be, even if I didn't yet know how far it would take me. Word count, 1002. File 3. 3 days blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known I craved. Morning texts from Xavier with coffee recommendations. Afternoons exploring neighborhoods that felt alive in ways Chicago never had. I called Rebecca less, blaming spotty service, while my internal monologue grew louder with every shared laugh. Xavier took me to a photography exhibit in Soma, his work hanging alongside others, raw images of people living unapologetically. This one's from last year, he said, pointing to a portrait of an older couple holding hands on a bench. They waited decades to be themselves. Made me realize time isn't promised. I stood there longer than I meant to, the weight of my own years pressing down. That night we grabbed tacos from a truck, sitting on a curb like college kids, and I told him about the summer I'd spent at Bible camp, praying away feelings I didn't understand. I thought if I just tried harder, the right path would appear. I admitted, sauce dripping onto my sleeve. Xavier wiped it away with a napkin, his touch brief but electric. Sometimes the right path is the one that scares you most. Back at my hotel, I scrolled through photos he'd sent. Us at the bridge, grinning like idiots, and the guilt hit. Rebecca's engagement photo stared back from my lock screen, her smile trusting. I dialed her, voice steady as I lied about extending for client meetings. But the conversation felt scripted, distant. The next morning Xavier surprised me with a drive up the coast, the Pacific crashing below Highway 1. Wind whipped through the open windows as he shared stories of past heartbreaks. The boyfriend who left when family disapproval grew too loud. I promised myself I'd never shrink again, he said, eyes on the road. I wanted to tell him I was shrinking every day back home, but the words stuck. We stopped at a secluded beach, shoes off, toes in cold sand. The conversation turned serious when my phone rang. My sister, frantic about Mom's health scare and how I needed to come home. Family first, she said. Xavier waited patiently while I paced, then simply said, "You don't have to choose today." That evening in a cozy Italian spot in North Beach, candlelight flickering, he asked the question I'd been dodging. "What do you want, Emmanuel?" "Not what they expect." I stared at my wine glass. "I don't know anymore," but being here with you feels like breathing for the first time." His smile was soft, understanding. We walked back under streetlights, shoulders brushing, and when we reached my hotel, he hesitated. "No rush. This is your journey." I watched him leave, heart aching with possibility and terror. The next day, I canceled my return flight, citing personal reasons, and met Xavier at Golden Gate Park for a picnic. We talked for hours about dreams. His next exhibit, my quiet wish to write instead of crunch numbers. The sun dipped low, painting everything gold, and for a moment the world narrowed to just us. But reality intruded with a text from my best friend back home. "Rebecca's worried. Everything okay?" The guilt crashed in, yet so did the clarity that hiding was no longer an option. Xavier sensed the shift. "Whatever comes next, you've got someone in your corner now." I nodded, the wrong flight feeling more like destiny with every passing hour. The return to New York hit like a storm front. I landed at JFK with Xavier's number saved under a simple heart emoji I couldn't delete, my suitcase heavier with unspoken truths. Rebecca met me at baggage claim, her hug warm but my arms stiff. "You look different," she said, searching my face. "Tired from the extra days, that's all?" I lied, the San Francisco fog still clinging to my thoughts. Work swallowed me whole. Meetings stacked like dominoes, but evenings belonged to late-night calls with Xavier, his voice pulling me back to the coast. "How's the big city treating the accidental tourist?" He'd tease, and I'd laugh, telling him about the subway crowds that no longer felt like home. My family noticed the distance first. Sunday dinner in Illinois turned tense when my father asked about wedding plans. "Rebecca's a good woman, son. Don't keep her waiting." The words landed like stones, stirring the old fears I'd carried since those college nights questioning everything. I drove back to the city that night, pulling over on the highway to call Xavier. "I feel like I'm drowning in expectations," I confessed. He listened, then shared his own coming-out story, the tears, the temporary silence from his brother. "It gets better when you stop performing." The misunderstanding started small. My best friend Jake, who'd known me since high school, dropped by my apartment unannounced. "You've been weird since that flight." Spill. I tried to brush it off, but when he pressed about the extra days in California, I mentioned Xavier casually. Jake's face changed. "A guy? Come on, Em. Rebecca's been planning your future." The conversation ended awkwardly, his warning echoing, "Don't throw everything away on a whim." Guilt gnawed deeper. I canceled a weekend trip to see Xavier, citing work, but the truth was fear. He sensed it. "You're pulling away. I get it, family, life, all of it. Just know I'm here." The sacrifice came when my mother's health scare escalated. I flew home to Illinois, sitting by her hospital bed while she squeezed my hand. "Promise me you'll be happy, Emmanuel. That's all we want." The words cracked something open. On the flight back, I drafted a message to Xavier but deleted it, the internal storm raging. Jake called later, voice tight. "I talked to your dad. He's worried you're not yourself." Betrayal stung sharp. My closest friend had shared my doubts without permission. I confronted him over coffee, voice shaking. "That was mine to tell." Jake looked away. I thought I was helping. The fight left me raw, alone in my apartment with only Xavier's last text glowing on the screen. "Whenever you're ready." I booked a ticket to San Francisco for the following weekend, the decision feeling like both freedom and freefall. The city greeted me with open arms and Xavier's grin at the airport. "You came back," he said simply, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. We spent the days walking old routes, talking through the mess, family pressure, Jake's slip, my crumbling engagement. "I told Rebecca the truth last night," I admitted over dim sum. "Not everything, but enough. She deserves better than half a heart." Xavier didn't celebrate, he just held space. That took courage. The growth felt slow but real, every conversation chipping away at the man I'd pretended to be. Yet the conflicts were far from over, and I knew the biggest test waited back east. The confrontation with my family unfolded in the living room of my childhood home, sunlight streaming through lace curtains that suddenly felt suffocating. I'd flown back after the San Francisco weekend, heart full but resolve shaky, determined to face what I'd avoided for years. "There's someone else?" I started, voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. My father's face hardened instantly. "A man? After everything we've given you?" The words cut deep, echoing old sermons and quiet judgments. My mother wept quietly, asking if Rebecca knew, if this was a phase. I explained the wrong flight, the connection with Xavier, the way it had forced me to see the life I'd been performing. "I'm not asking for approval," I said. "Just understanding." The room filled with accusations. Selfishness, betrayal of faith, what about the grandkids? My sister tried to mediate, but the damage spread like cracks in glass. Jake texted apologies, but the friendship felt fractured, his well-meaning betrayal still fresh. Back in New York, Rebecca met me for closure, her eyes red but kind. "I saw it coming, Em. I just hoped I was wrong." The breakup was gentle, a shared grief for what could have been, yet freeing in its honesty. Xavier called that night, voice calm across the miles. "You did the hard part. Now breathe." But doubt crept in during sleepless nights, the internal crisis peaking when my father left a voicemail. "Come home and fix this before it destroys us." I flew to San Francisco again, needing Xavier's steadiness. We hiked the same trail, silence heavy until he stopped. "You're carrying their expectations like a backpack full of rocks. Set it down." Tears came then, years of suppressed feelings pouring out on a sunlit ridge. He held me, not as a lover pushing forward but as a friend offering space. The misunderstanding flared when Xavier suggested I stay longer. "I can't just abandon everything," I snapped, fear turning to anger. "You don't get how hard this is." He stepped back, hurt flashing. "I do get it. I lived it. But I won't watch you shrink again." The argument left me walking the streets alone, questioning if love meant losing my entire world. The sacrifice crystallized the next day when I called my boss and resigned, citing the need for authenticity over the corner office. "I'm moving toward something real," I told him, the words tasting like both loss and liberation. Xavier met me at the park, apology in his eyes. "I shouldn't have pushed. Your pace." We sat on a bench, rebuilding with honest talk about boundaries, fears, the future neither of us had mapped. Growth came in small steps. Therapy sessions I started online, letters to my family that went unanswered at first, late-night calls where Xavier shared his own scars without demanding I match them. The psychological weight lifted gradually, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. Yet the highest stakes loomed. Returning home for one final conversation, knowing it could end in permanent silence or fragile understanding. Xavier drove me to the airport, kiss on my forehead gentle. "Whatever happens, you're not alone." The plane took off, and I stared at the clouds, the man I'd become on that first wrong flight ready to face the consequences. The final family dinner in Illinois stretched long into the evening, tension thick as the pot roast cooled on the table. I'd arrived unannounced after weeks of unanswered calls, suitcase light but heart heavy with everything I'd gained in California. "I'm not here to argue," I began, voice clearer than it had been in years. "I'm here to be honest." My father listened as I recounted the flight mix-up, the stranger who became anchor, the slow awakening that love between men wasn't a flaw but a truth I'd denied too long. My mother reached across the table, tears steady. "We raised you to be true to yourself. It just hurts to see the path change." The conversation twisted through anger and grief. My sister defending my right to choose, my brother-in-law staying silent. But by dessert, fragile bridges formed. "We don't understand it all," Dad admitted. "But we love you. Come home when you're ready." The words weren't full acceptance, yet they were enough to breathe. Back in New York, I packed the apartment, donating suits that no longer fit the man I'd become, and booked a one-way to San Francisco. Xavier waited at arrivals, arms open, the embrace carrying months of distance and growth. We drove to his apartment overlooking the bay, the city lights welcoming me home in a way Chicago never had. Days turned to weeks of building something real. Shared mornings with coffee and quiet talks. Evenings photographing sunsets where I finally picked up a camera myself. Friendships reformed slowly. Jake reached out with genuine remorse, and we rebuilt over beers, his support tentative but present. The internal conflicts quieted, replaced by a steady peace I'd earned through every hard choice. One crisp evening on the beach, waves whispering secrets, Xavier turned to me. "You chose you. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen." I pulled him close, the romantic moment feeling earned after all the storms. Family rifts mended in pieces, betrayals forgiven, sacrifices that led to this joy. Life in California unfolded in vibrant layers. Gallery openings where Xavier showcased our joint photos, weekend drives up the coast, quiet nights where we talked about futures without fear. The emotional journey had transformed me from the man rushing through airports to one rooted in authenticity. Relationships deepening with friends who accepted the full story. Society's whispers fading against the strength we built together. Yet even in happiness, reflections lingered on the road taken. In the end, one has to wonder, was Emmanuel right to follow his heart across that wrong flight and choose love over every expectation? Or should he have stayed in the safe life everyone knew? True or false?